Does civil disobedience really get you excited? Go to freestateproject.org, get signed up, move to New Hampshire, get involved with the next wave of liberty activism, and be the next Rosa Parks. The Free State Project is your best chance for liberty in your lifetime. freestateproject.org.
This is the Lew Rockwell Show.
Well, boy, it's so great to have as our guest this morning Dr. Ron Paul, Congressman from Texas, the great champion of liberty and of sound money, of Austrian economics, the man who turned the country on its ear during the presidential election, built a movement that's continuing to grow. He's got a book coming out called End the Fed, and as we know, there's a huge movement about that. But Rob, before we talk about monetary questions in the Federal Reserve, tell me about secession. You've been in the news a lot recently on that subject.
Yes, and it wasn't like I went out of my way and volunteered to get into that little debate, because obviously there's still a lot of controversy with that. But, when our governor brought that up here in Texas, it made a lot of news, and there were a couple factors there. One, I think he did that for political reasons, and he isn't really identified with really a strong states' rights position, but I think he was doing a little bit of pandering because he's in a tight race with Hutchinson, and actually it probably helped him politically, which has driven the liberals nuts, because they think, how could possibly independence from the federal government be a political plus? So then they started throwing words around to anybody who could even think about that. It's treasonous and un-American. That's what annoyed me, and I thought, well, I'm going to make a statement. This is just, terrible that they take a good principle and turn it into something evil, especially that so many of us understand that it is the principle of secession that allowed us to form our own country. So I made that statement, but I've gotten, some grief over it. But I think one of my best arguments has been to neutralize some of them, has been this argument that, we all have voluntarily joined the United Nations. We pay the most of any other country, but we're outgunned and outnumbered. And even those who like the United Nations don't like us to be run roughshod over it. And I think even those who want us to be in the United Nations aren't quite willing to say, oh, no, we never have the right to leave the United Nations. And I think the principle is similar. If we join something voluntarily, we ought to have the right to leave it. But I guess I'm a little bit surprised that I wasn't blasted more than I was on the issue, because I thought CNN gave me a credible interview and didn't make fun of it. Maybe they were more so than I realized, but I thought the chance I had to explain it was reasonable, where they asked questions. I know the comedy shows mocked it and made fun of it, but nevertheless, I hope I was able to get a few people to start thinking about that principle.
Well, it seemed to me that CNN was curious more than wanting to go after you, and I think that's true of a lot of people. It's not a hate crime to mention this principle. So I think it was all very much to the good that the subject came up, that Perry, whatever his motives, and I'm sure you're right, that it was just purely politics.
Numbers are so important, and I keep thinking that we who have been arguing this case for freedom for a long time have never had much credibility with the media. But the number that I think was most impressive was $6 million in one day. Raising that money on the internet caught their attention of all the politicians and the media, that there must be support out there. Then all of a sudden you gain credibility. You might have been saying something for 30 years and nobody paid any attention, but the fact that there was a lot more support than they ever dreamed, got their attention. And now on different issues, whether it has to do with secession or piracy or the Federal Reserve, and I think that, to me, has been the greatest benefit of what I've seen in the last couple of years, is that there's more credibility for the principles of liberty, and at least we can talk about them more than ever before.
Well, Ron, for more than 30 years, you've been a serious student of monetary economics, of the Federal Reserve, of the history of business cycles, and I must say a very accurate prophet as to what the various policies of the Fed and the Treasury would bring about. You've served on the relevant congressional committees. So what the heck is happening? I mean, we have, of course, this vast expansion of the money supply by Bernanke and company. We have the public-private partnerships in banking, rip-offs by the power elite, as usual. What's going on?
Well, what I told Bernanke one day, or one of the people testifying, was that I told him this was the big one. People, we've been anticipating, a big correction for a long time, and I think it really is. And although they have been able to prop up the system ever since 1971, after we lost the last link to gold, the Keynesian philosophy seemed to be working. Spend more money, borrow more money, print more money, and you can reinflate the bubble. But this time it's not happening, which is what Austrian economics teaches, that eventually it can't happen, that confidence will be lost. And so now they're desperate. They're still convinced of their theories. They're absolutely convinced that if you print enough and borrow enough, and anytime they talk about it, they always say, well, we should be fiscal conservatives, but in time we'll take care of this. But for now, they almost threaten you, say, don't save money. The government can't save money. The government can't quit spending. And individuals should go out and spend money. Exactly opposite of what any one of us would have to do if we were responsible for ourselves. If we got ourselves into trouble and owed too much money and threatened with bankruptcy, we'd have to cut back, work harder, save money, pay off debt, and then we could get back on our feet again. The principle applies to a country as well, and if you resort to borrowing and inflating, eventually not only do you bring the financial system down, which has already happened, that's only one half of it. The second half will be the collapse of the confidence in the dollar, and that I believe will come. I think the dollar was the foundation of the financial system for these past 35-plus years, and that was a house of cards. It's collapsed. There's still enough trust in the dollar, but that is the foundation. But it's nothing more than sand, and it will collapse because you just can't double the money supply in 12 months and think it won't lose value. So people keep saying, well, what are you watching for? You're going to watch for the dollar? You're going to go down in value on the international exchange markets? Well, not necessarily. I mean, I understand a little bit about this and what's been going on, but I've never rushed out to buy yen and buy euros, and even now, I'm not even sure the people who used to go and buy Swiss francs are going to be any better off, because everybody's in bed together. So I think what people have to watch for will be prices going up and what the price of gold is.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Is the growth of government driving you crazy? Is it frustrating you that you can't do anything about it? Now you can. Join the Free State Project. Move to New Hampshire and get active with other liberty activists who have already slowed the growth of government in New Hampshire. Go to freestateproject.org.
Ron, you mentioned when Richard Nixon closed the gold window and severed the final tie between the dollar and gold on August 15, 1971. I remember so clearly. I was driving in the square in Hillsdale, Michigan, and I felt like a bolt of lightning had hit my car when I heard that news. I couldn't believe it. And so I know it had a big effect on you. Didn't it lead you into your public career?
Yes, and of course, many of those announcements came on the weekends, and that was a Sunday night. August 15th was a Sunday night. Not only did they close the gold window and default on that promise, they put a 10% import tax on everything that came into the country, and put on wage and price controls. What struck me, I mean, the monetary stuff was pretty bad, but what really struck me was the next Monday morning, I attended a little legislative council of our local Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce came out for it, and I thought, what's going on here?
Yeah, true.
And not only that, is the stock market went up. It went up, at that time, it went up the most in one day ever. It went up like 34 points. Percentage-wise, that was a big jump. And I said, either I'm crazy or the world's crazy, because this is not good news. And, of course, those of us who had been concerned, won that argument, because look at what happened during the 1970s. But I did get interested in public policy through economics and especially monetary policy, and that was a strong motivation. Of course, that sort of, developed into my deep concern for personal liberty and a lot of interest in foreign policy and monetary policy and debt. But when you think about it, it all comes together, on this. I think if you defend liberty, you want a sensible foreign policy and you want a government to act